Welcome. You are now linked to your telecom retirement.
Hey, how we doing today? I got a confession to make. Um, I hate school. I always hated school. I was a mama's boy. Um, Gosh, the things I admit on this podcast, I really was. I remember my mother tells me stories of going to preschool and crying going to preschool. I hated preschool. I hated school in general. And it seemed like there were a couple of moments that really affected that. One of them was late 70s. We had a TV in the house. We might have had two, but they were rabbit ear TVs. It's the late 70s. Cable didn't come to our town till we were like the last town in Massachusetts to get cable. Uh, and my brother was watching either the movie or the TV show. I think it was the TV show, The Paper Chase with John Houseman. John Houseman. And if you don't remember it, it was this guy who was in his first year of law school at Harvard Law, and John Houseman was the outrageously difficult professor. Now I'm 8, 9 years old, and I'm watching this, and this is my view of college, is you're going to get there, and it is going to be impossibly hard dealing with teachers that are never going to be pleased, even when you do your best work. And I hated school because of it. I rarely have like a panic attack. I had panic attacks over school. I would hate the month of August because August just meant that school was coming. I've said this before, my favorite month is February. And people are like, you're insane. Why would you like February? I don't like February. I hate February. But February, I know it's already over. The weather's not going to throw anything worse at me. In August, it's all downhill. It's going to be February soon. So that's how I view things. And I talk about all this because my son, it's right around start of school. Everybody's getting back to the classes, and my son's a junior this year. My youngest is a junior, and it's time to start looking at colleges for the last time. For the last time, I'm so happy. The last time teaching somebody how to drive, the last time sending somebody off to college. Really happy about that. But it started me thinking, it started all these juices flowing of the problems with higher education today. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of this, but I want to kind of give you a little bit different perspective. Because watching my 3 older kids, including my son-in-law, go through college, I thought maybe I was being too harsh. I thought maybe it was public school versus private school. As I watched them really get gypped out of an education, I looked at what they were learning and the levels that they were going to. Outside of the math classes where it's pretty much this is what you have to do. They didn't go nearly into depth as they should have. My middle daughter, Anna, who works for me, got a marketing degree. And I look at the marketing classes that she took, and they mailed it in. And that was so frustrating. It's just that the education is not as robust as when I graduated in 91, started in 87. The education is not as robust. It's definitely dumbed down, and it comes down to a financial decisions by the school. It's not nefarious. I don't want to say that there are a lot of people out there that are conspiracy theorists, that anything bad has got to be because somebody's doing something bad, not that somebody's just not as competent as they should be. But the dumbing down of our education is purely a financial function. Is if a college can keep somebody a few years longer, they get to get paid a few years longer. I recall in 87 sitting in orientation over the summer of 87, and the dean, the president, whoever it was, sat there and gave the old, and you don't hear this speech anymore. Look to your left, look to your right. At least one of you is going to be gone before the end of this school year. Whoa, wait a second. You're already saying you're going to cut a third of the people? They're just going to get wiped out. Now, some of them would transfer out someplace else, and some people would transfer in, so it wouldn't be a true third would be gone. But there were more freshmen than any other class. And that's just not true anymore. Is what the colleges realized was, if we hang on to these kids longer, we'll get paid more, and that's good for us. And I started researching. I was listening to something. I was listening to somebody talk. Again, it's that time of year. These are the types of things that people are talking about. And I did some research on this. Do you know that Stanford? Now, Stanford has always been known as, we are going to take the country's best and brightest and make them better and brighter. Okay. And that's like their goal. That's their mantra. Do you know that they reject the vast majority of perfect scores on the SATs that apply to Stanford? So if you have a perfect score on your SATs, it's not guaranteeing you a seat at Stanford. And in fact, it doesn't really help you at all. There's all these other factors that have become important to them over time. And I think their average score is like a 1530, which is good. It's better than I did. But it's nowhere near the perfect it used to be, because they're pulling in all of these other things. They're looking at different things, and they're not as worried about making the best and brightest better and brighter. Yale, this one blew me away. This was an ABC report I was reading online. 80% of the grades issued by Yale, and the most recent year, which was like 2022, maybe 2023, were A's. 80% were A's. What are the odds that Yale finds perfectly the most brilliant people that they get A's? Probably not. Everything's a bell curve. Everything, the human body, human being, nature in general runs on a bell curve. Is you're going to have the majority of people are going to be in the middle. You're going to have a couple people, outlier on one side, a couple people out on the other side. And you look at Yale, and Yale says, oh no, 80% of our people are excellent. It's the old Garrison Keillor, Lake Wobegon, where all the kids are above average. What the heck happened is the average score should be a B minus maybe. I remember years ago when I was a kid, and they were, is living in Massachusetts. One of the things that they have around here, I haven't heard anybody talk about it for years, is going to the JFK library. And it may have been built in the 70s, and that's why they pushed it. I don't know. I don't remember, but I remember the commercial. And, and you can go see all these JFK artifacts. And one of the things you can do is you can go and see his report card in handwritten, because it's 1930s, 1940s, handwritten report card where he got a D at Harvard. President of the United States, one of the best statesmen of the 20th century, got a D at Harvard. Now 80% of the graduates of Yale get A's, or 80% of the grades at Yale are all A's. We've definitely see a change. I have a client that she's a doctorate in nursing, and she taught nursing classes for a time, and she gave it up because she said that the students just think that you're supposed to give them everything, that it's just supposed to be handed to them. They don't want to learn because they've spent all this time in an institution that's just coddled them just to keep them along. And another thing I listen to, and I just want to throw all these things out there as kind of proof that we've got a problem in this, is I listened to an interview with a university president, and very good university, liberal arts type of university. And she made a very good case that, people pick on philosophy degrees, English majors, art history, all of these things that don't really apply to the world. And she said, if you look at it, a large number of the great people in this world today were English majors. And she's right. They just didn't pay $300,000 for that degree. That's where we have the problem. The disconnect is that the education, even if it was equal to what it was 30 or 35 years ago, the cost is extremely outrageous at this point. It's unaffordable, it's unattainable. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of where that came from. It started in the early 1980s, so over 40 years ago. The government had a good idea. Now, again, I don't want to say that there was this nefarious plot to stick it to everybody. It wasn't. Is you look at a lot of the other things that came out of Congress in this time period. You look at Tax Reform Act of '86, where a lot of Congress people lost their jobs over building a really good law for the most part. There's a couple of things I have complaints about, but by and large, Tax Reform Act of '86 was spectacular. This was the same Congress under the Reagan era that preserved Social Security for the last 40 years. And Social Security would have gone bankrupt if not for these people. So I look and I go, man, they made some good choices. And they made one really bad one. They didn't see it at the time. They didn't realize how big it would become, because if you open that door just a crack, obviously people are going to rush through it, is they said, let's make a change. And instead of utilizing the vast majority of federal funds for grants, so Pell Grants and things of that nature, where we're handing a small number of people cash to go to college, let's help more people by creating loans, and let's loan people money to go to college. And that seems logical. It's like, oh, okay, they were definitely helping, and they were definitely helping. It didn't help. It made things worse. Is what you've seen over the last 40 years is, I think so when I started in '87, which was a couple of years after the student loans started, I think you could borrow $2,650. Why that number sticks out, I'm a numbers guy. I don't know why it sticks out, but that's the number I have stuck in my head from almost 40 years ago. That was how much you could borrow for a first-year student under one of these loans, which doesn't sound like a lot, but my first year of tuition was, I don't know, $10,000 or $11,000 of room and board at Bentley College. I'll talk about that in a second. And you can pretty much borrow most of it now. That's scary. It was a situation where when parents needed to borrow money for their kids' education, they took out a home equity loan. That's what they did. And over time, the proliferation of these loans, because even in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was going to school, people weren't borrowing just for educational purposes. They weren't doing that. It wasn't a cultural thing. That cultural shift happened during the 90s. People could still afford to go to college, and because there were so many people going to college, the number of students that were applying every year was getting larger and larger and larger. And because of that, the schools were taking that additional money from the loans, and they were just raising tuition by that amount and utilizing that for, again, not nefarious purposes, but not thinking it completely through. Oh, we'll add things. I went to Bentley College. One of the things that Bentley did while I was there was they had this set of concrete stairs in the front. Now, granted, the money was given as a grant by a couple, I believe, to pay for this. But I'm thinking that was a lot of waste of money. They had this beautiful set of stairs, and it was concrete stairs. We never thought about it. They clad the whole thing in granite. And gosh, it's gorgeous. And I think it cost at the time like $100,000. It was a fortune to do. And I think, man, could have improved programs, could have held tuition. There's a whole lot of things you could have done with that money. And let's get some granite stairs. They look really nice. Let's make a new cafeteria. It'll look really nice. Let's create these new departments. You know, you have this is line and staff, especially in telecom. Line and staff is staff supports the line. The line is dealing with, the structure of the business, the customers, delivering to the customers, raw materials. All of that is line, and the rest is staff. HR is staff, and staff is necessary. But what you found was over the last 40 years is staff in these universities has grown exponentially. And that's where all that money's been going. Do we need them? We didn't need them in 1982. Do we need them in 2024 is the big question. What I found is I ran some quick numbers. I looked at, I think my first year at Bentley, we'll call it 11,000. I think it was less than that. We'll call it 11,000 in 1987. I think it was less than that. I think tuition was $6,000 and room and board was like $3,200. Again, I'm a numbers guy. That's the number, but I'm going to use 11 as the number because I think it softens my case, if anything. I looked it up online. Tuition, room, board, all expenses this year for Bentley College Bentley University now is $85,000. Again, another quick calc online, that's over double the rate of inflation in that period of time from 87 through 2024. It's a massive growth. It's unattainable. Is the value I received is my parents were able to put aside that money and pay for my tuition. I paid my own room and board. I worked throughout the school year and then full-time during the summer and full-time during winter break. And I was able to write the check every year for room and board. Actually, my last year, I didn't pay room and board. I bought a car and lived at home. I bought a brand new car, was able to afford the brand new car because things were, I was able to do so. Could you imagine how many hours you'd have to work at even $15 an hour, which is minimum wage here in Massachusetts, in order to pay for room and board at a Bentley college, which I think is like $12,000, $15,000, something like that. It's 1,000 hours. It's 1,000 hours. That's unattainable in today, in where we live today. In Massachusetts, we had it worse, and we didn't see it. Again, Bill Weld, and I loved Bill Weld. What a great governor he was. He came out with this program which he must have been 84, 88. I'm trying to remember when he got elected. One of his things was he was going to hold the price of tuition in Massachusetts. He was going to utilize more general funds for higher education. And it seemed like a good idea. I remember thinking, wow, that's a good idea at the time. Except it created a disconnect between what people are paying and what they're getting. So, you value things based on what you think they're worth. Is if you're getting a $20,000 education and it should be a $40,000 education, well, it's only 20, so I'll accept this lesser amount. And that's happened with a number of states where money is being set aside through general funds to pay for these educations, and because of it, people are willing to settle for a lesser education. So we have this ever increasing cost, and what we're seeing is people are walking out of college with these not great degrees and a massive amount of debt, massive debt. And the one thing that we don't do, and I'm really speaking to the parents of students that haven't gone to college yet, or maybe you're in the middle of it, you've got some in and some not, or maybe you're a grandparent and you can kind of get some tips to kind of push down to your kids to help them make good decisions with their kids, is nobody puts a value on that loan. Nobody says, oh, taking out this loan is going to mean your income on average is going to increase by X. There will be studies that will say, oh, getting a college education means X number of dollars more per year. Well, that's not in a vacuum. The ones that get the really good degrees are skewing those numbers. So you really can't take that as a lump sum. We got to really look at the overall. And what's happened over the last 40 years is we've just bumped along. So you have to go to college. You have to go to college. You have to go to college. And one of those Bible verses that always sticks in my head is the sins of the father carried to the third and fourth generation. And my gosh, that is so true. It is so frighteningly true, and not for the reason you think. This is not some curse. We just trust that the previous generation knows what they're doing, and we don't know what their motivation was. Probably one of the funnier jokes, and funny to me because it deals with these things, is man and woman get married. It's the first Sunday. Woman buys a roast. It's an old school joke, and she's going to make roast beef. And she takes the thing and she cuts it in half and lays the two halves next to each other, puts it in the oven. She takes it up. The husband goes, "What the heck are you doing?" "I don't know. This is how you cook a roast beef." He goes, "Why are you cutting it in half?" "I don't know. My mother always cut it in half." "I don't think you're supposed to do that. I've never seen anybody else do that." She's, "No, this is how you make a roast beef." So a couple of weeks later, she's visiting with her mom, and she says, "Hey, Mom, why do we cut the roast in half when we're making roast beef?" Mom goes, "I don't know. Your grandmother always did that, and it came out great. So I just kept doing it. Is you have to talk to your grandmother. So it's a couple of weeks later. She goes to the old lady's home. This is how old the joke is. It's not a nursing home. It's an old folks home. She goes to the old folks home and she sits down with grandma. And she says, "Grandma, I made my new husband, your famous the family famous roast beef, and he loved it. It was great." She's like, "Oh, that's great, honey." She says, "Can I ask you a question?" She says, "Sure." "We cut the roast in half. What's the reasoning for that technique?" And she says, "Oh, honey, when we first got married and were poor, we had this little tiny oven that was kind of short, and the roast wouldn't fit in it, so we had to cut it in half." And that's kind of how we view college. Is you're just supposed to go to college. You're just supposed to go to college, and we forgot that there's a reason for that. There's a value attached to that, and if there's not a value attached to it, you need to reevaluate. Should you be going to college, or should you be taking that degree? It's that frog in the pot problem. You turn the burner on and slowly raise the temperature, and the frog won't leave. Actually, funny side story is they've done as obvious with everything. Scientists did a test. They stuck frogs in the water. They turned the water up. The frogs every time jumped out. Every single time they go, "Hey, wait a second, it's a little too hot. Now I'm leaving." But it's the old analogy: is if you keep making things worse incrementally as humans, we don't necessarily notice it. We just keep going and forward. We just keep doing the same thing over and over because grandma cut the roast in half. I've got to cut the roast in half. The first sign I saw, it's got to be 10 or 15 years ago, was I had relatives of a client come in. They had a specific problem dealing with something. And the daughter, quote unquote, was in her early 30s. She had attended an Ivy League school, I forget which one, and then attended that school's law school afterwards. And at the time, we're talking 15 years ago, she had over $200,000 worth of debt, student debt, that she couldn't get out of. That you can't just declare bankruptcy. They will not let you. You're stuck with that. And she was making maybe $35,000, $40,000 a year. There was never, ever, ever going to be a chance of her paying off that debt, ever. So we need to, as parents and grandparents, start thinking about this on a value basis, because for years, for decades, for a century or more, the value is built in, and now it's not so much. Is we need to make sure that the value is going to be there, or you're going to saddle your kids with horrific debt for nothing. I was talking to a gentleman a couple of years ago, and his oldest was a junior, so it was same age as mine is now. And he was talking about, no, he's either going to BU, BC, or Northeastern. That's just it. That's it. And BU, BC, Boston College, Boston University, Northeastern, cost about the same as Bentley University, which is about $85,000 today. And he had no money to pay for it. He had maybe $100,000, which for those institutions, again, 8 times 4 is 32, plus the other 2 is 340. Let's call it $350,000 when you're all done. He's got 100. Let's say they get another $100,000 in some sort of various aid, which seems excessively generous. You're still talking $150,000 worth of debt. And he thought that was okay. That's just fine. That's just, they'll have to deal with it. It was more about his prestige of being able to say, my kid went to X, Y, or Z. My kid is not going to go to a state school or anything like that. They're going to go to the highest end that I believe shows that I am a good parent. And he was saddling his kids because he didn't look at the value. Putting rocks in their pockets so they can never tread water. They can just never. They're going to drown. And we see that over and over again. And I'm telling you, please don't do that. It's your job as a parent to help these students. It's your job. It's not your job to say, hey, whatever you want. If you think about it, there's only one place that an 18-year-old gets to act, quote unquote, act like an adult. That's the military. And the reason is it's very structured. It's very regimented. We would never, they get to vote. And even then, the voting age of 18 is a fairly modern phenomenon. It used to be 20. It was 21 for a long, long time. We're having a 16 or a 17-year-old making life decisions, financial life decisions for themselves that they have no ability to make in the first place. They have no ability to make it. Their brains have not developed enough to make a good financial decision on that. And we're allowing that to happen. As parents, it's our job to help them. And my son and I have had some difficult conversations over this, in hopes of helping him. I've pushed him in certain directions of, look to this person to get some help. He actually went to a camp this summer, and got some really good advice. I was really happy to hear that he's kind of processing that of, oh, I should look at this possibly versus this, because it will provide me more opportunities and make sure that the value is there. It's all about that value. So absolutely, definitely important to deal with all of that. I want to talk about 3 specific solutions. So you're saying, okay, so what am I supposed to do? I've got a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old. What am I supposed to do? Number 1, pick a degree that's going to provide a good income. Is here in Massachusetts, is the number of legal immigrants is massive as a percentage of residents versus the rest of the country. Why? It is tech and medical people from another country that got a degree specifically in tech and medical because it pays money, and they came here because we don't have enough people here that have those degrees, or it costs too much. So we have to import them from other places. Get a degree that's going to provide you income. It's nice to do the thing you want to do. I love what I do, so it's really hard for me to kind of separate that. But it's great to do what you want to do, but it's also important to have the money so you can do what you want to do. So number 1 is find a degree for your student that will provide an income. And if you can't, there's a problem. If what's the one? Egyptology. I have a degree in Egyptology, and all you can do is get a higher degree in Egyptology to teach other people Egyptology, because there's so little to be done. It's a cool field, but there's like 8 jobs and that's it. Don't do that. Second thing is, the Mike Rose out there will be happy about this one, but don't go to college. Learn a trade. We value this like it's so important that you have a degree, that you have a job that has a degree. There's nothing wrong with a trade. There's nothing wrong with being a carpenter or a plumber or an electrician. Those are great things. I'll tell you the one that I keep bumping into is welders. I have a client who's a welder, and he's got good business sense. I will say this: if your child, son or daughter, and I have an acquaintance whose daughter is a welder, and she makes a fortune. If your son or daughter is going to go into the trades, make sure they get some sort of education in business, whether that's taking courses somewhere or whatever, but things like finances, so they understand how to keep books, management, so they know how to run a company, forecasting. All of that is important for them, vitally important, so that they can run a business someday. If they want to grow just from being the regular guy to being the owner of a business, they have the tools to do that. And the third thing is consider cheaper alternatives. That gentleman I talked to that his son had to go to these schools. You don't have to. My next door neighbor, Paul. Paul's kind of rough and tumble, Marine, and I love him. He's the kind of guy that you want behind you in a firefight. You really do. He has your back. He can be rough around the edges, but he has your back. I would like to bottle what he did to raise his sons. He's got 3 boys at 3 very different careers that busted their humps. And my gosh, they did. And none of them are nobody's on Wall Street. Nobody's inventing the new whatever. But my gosh, they are successful in what they do. And they are hardworking kids. So his middle one, Ryan owns a tattoo studio. Believe it or not, that's what his job is. He owns a tattoo studio. He doesn't work in one. He owns one. And Ryan's been an amazing artist for years. He's also a spectacular basketball player, great hockey player, very athletic. He knew he wanted to go to school for art. So what he did was he went to community college for 2 years at $1,000, $1,500, $1,800, and got all of his gen eds all taken care of. And then he went to a state school. We could take all of those credits and go to a state school. He didn't start at a state school. He finished there. He did his 2 years at, I think, UMass Dartmouth or Bridgewater or one of the local colleges in our area, and graduated with a 4-year degree that in today's dollars might have cost him $30,000. He got a degree for $30,000, less than the price of a car. It is possible to do so if you're looking just for the piece of paper. If you got, what's the old songline, got my paper and I was free. If that's what you're looking for, finding the cheapest alternative is really, really smart, especially if you're in an industry that you have to go for an advanced degree. Don't spend the money on the first degree. Don't do that. So, yeah, that's kind of, I apologize. Just kind of throwing that out. I had all of this stuff come at me just recently. It was the first week of school, the first weeks of school. The buses are out there. I hate the buses. I hate the long lines at Dunkin' Donuts with the moms getting donuts for the kids. Don't feed your kids donuts. Give them a bowl of oatmeal at home, please. Pretty please. It's bonkers out there, but was definitely thinking about this. Take the time. Be a parent to your child. Regardless of how old they look, they need help. Their brains have not developed. Their brains have not completely finished developing. It's important to make sure that you help them through this time to make good decisions so they become productive adults. That's our job as parents. That's our job, is to raise productive adults, not to raise kids, to raise productive adults. So thanks for your time today. Jump down in the show notes for ways to get in touch with us if you have any questions, or you kind of need our advice on something, especially college related, but retirement, IPs or RIFs or any sort of offers at the companies, feel free to jump down there and connect with us on social media or through our website. And I will catch you next time. Stay safe out there.
Thank you for listening to Your Telecom Retirement with your host, Dennis O'Keefe. Please click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available.